The self-proclaimed bad boy for life, Sean Combs, is facing a series of new allegations of rape, sexual abuse, and sexual assault tonight. At least 6 people filed civil lawsuits against him in federal court in New York today, including one man who was underage at the time. The accusers are remaining anonymous. There are 2 women and 4 men in this latest wave of lawsuits. The complaints span more than a decade, from 1995 through 2021, during which they say Combs raped and drugged them. One of the complaints accuses Combs of raping and threatening to kill a 19-year-old college student in 2004. Another claims Combs molested a 16-year-old boy at one of Combs's infamous white parties at his mansion in the Hamptons in 1998. Telling the boy that it was a rite of passage into the music industry. If that's even remotely true, you have to wonder what other scandals might erupt as this case unfolds. Remember that the music industry somehow sidestepped the Me Too movement. Could a bigger reckoning be on the horizon? Today's lawsuits were filed by Texas-based lawyer Tony Busby, who's already representing more than 100 alleged victims who've already come forward against Combs. The 54-year-old Combs pleaded not guilty to racketeering and sex trafficking charges. His lawyers argue that the accusations are from people looking to get a, quote, quick payday. Combs is now spending his days before the trial at a jail in Brooklyn since he was arrested nearly a month ago. Joining us now is Neama Rahmani, former federal prosecutor. Great to have you here. I think the biggest headline from here is that one of these alleged victims was a minor. That's serious.
Very serious, and I agree with you, Elizabeth. Obviously, it changes the game. This is the first individual who was allegedly assaulted while they were a minor. And obviously, it's just a civil lawsuit. But if that works its way into the federal criminal indictment, if there is indeed a superseding indictment, that changes the game in 2 ways. One, of course, there's a mandatory minimum and very serious sentences for sex trafficking of minors. But importantly, it really gets around one of Combs's defense. That is that the sexual contact happened, but it was consensual between adults because, of course, minors cannot consent.
Exactly, because they've argued, listen, in his bail hearing and in public statements, they've said, okay, it might not be your cup of tea, his sexual predilections, but they're not illegal if they're all consenting. A minor cannot give consent.
Exactly, Elizabeth. So the defense would have to go in a very different direction. It would have to be that the contact never happened at all. So again, very different type of defense. So, to the extent that more and more victims are coming forward, sometimes it's hard for juries to believe, an allegation of 1 or 2 victims. But when victim after victim, and here you have dozens now who are coming forward and telling the same story of physical and sexual violence, drugs, Diddy's security being involved, very serious rape allegations. It's going to be very hard to disbelieve.
Yeah, we should never forget that even though Bill Cosby's conviction was overturned, one of the things that earned him that conviction was the litany. They later ruled it was prejudicial. So many people were coming forward. Same thing in the Weinstein case. Woman after woman after woman telling identical stories. One of the victims in this lawsuit filed today against Sean Combs alleges that Combs forced him to perform a sex act in the stockroom of a Macy's department store. Macy's is also named in the lawsuit. Why?
Well, this is an individual that worked for a rival clothing company. And, Diddy, of course, owned Sean John. This is an allegation that after the rape happened and this individual reported it, they were fired. So there's a wrongful termination component as well. But like you said, with Weinstein, with Cosby, oftentimes predators, they use the same MO. And we saw that in those 2 cases and how powerful it was. Cosby, the first time he was tried, there was 1 victim with prior bad acts witness. The jury hung. The second time, 1 victim, 5 prior bad acts witnesses, and the jury convicted. I can't even imagine how many victims and witnesses we're going to have in Combs's case. It's going to be a lot, and I think it's going to be very difficult to defend.
The lawyer who filed these lawsuits today, Tony Busby, listen, who knows if, what's really true here. He claims he has more than 3,000 people who've contacted him with stories about Sean Combs.
And I don't know if that's true or not, but if it indeed is filing lawsuits on behalf of 120 individuals, and we saw 6 of those today, including 25 minors, the sheer number of lawsuits, I mean, it's overwhelming. I mean, we're talking about someone that was reportedly worth $1 billion. Maybe he's worth half of that now. But by the time the case is over, these civil lawsuits, judgments, and settlements, he's probably going to be broke. So the question is, how much money is going to be had for these victims when this is all said and done? Probably not a whole lot.
Neama, what effect, I mean, will the jury in his criminal trial even know about all of these lawsuits, even know about these more than 100 victims who have sued him? Keeping in mind, by the way, that, you know, he's had 18, I believe, lawsuits filed against him. One has been settled. That's one involved Cassie, his former girlfriend, the singer Cassie. And that involved that infamous videotape, the horrific videotape that shows him beating her up and dragging her by the hair in a hotel hallway. He denied doing it. And then the video emerged, and he came forward and said, "I'm so sorry I did it." In other words, his credibility is already in the mud.
Oh, completely shot. And the irony is, and again, I don't know if this is true, but Cassie wanted $30 million to settle that case. Diddy was reportedly only willing to pay $10 million, which was 1% of his net worth. The statute of limitations was coming up in New York, so she was forced to file. Of course, he settled the next day, but that started this whole Me Too movement where everyone came forward. But to answer your question, at trial, the jurors aren't going to hear about the civil lawsuits unless those victims testify as one of 3 ways: as a victim who was actually charged as sex trafficking, a RICO predicate act, or a prior bad acts witness. But those victims are going to have to come, show up to trial, testify, and if so, the jurors will hear the allegations, not what's necessarily in one of these civil lawsuits.
The names are all anonymous in these lawsuits filed today. Will prosecutors be trying to get those names so they can interview these people?
Oh, absolutely, Elizabeth, especially that minor victim. I'm obviously, as a prosecutor, the laws are intended to protect minors, but that's such an important victim that I think prosecutors are going to be talking to both him as well as the 25 other alleged victims who were minors.
Unbelievable development. Neama Rahmani, thank you so much for your expertise. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Talk to you soon.
All right.